You guys, I have a vaccine update. I did it. I got it. It wasn't that bad. So for everyone who has needle anxiety like me, just look away and it was fine. And then my arm kind of hurt for a little bit and it was great, but 10 out of 10 recommend. Definitely get that vaccine. It's not that bad. I was freaking out for nothing. But anyways, of course, this is the HackerNoon podcast, and my name is Amy Tom. Today, I am joined by Jeff, who is the VP of Product and Solution Marketing at Couchbase, and by Mike, who is the founder and CEO of Gluu, which is a security software company. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. Mike, how are you doing?
Great, Amy. Thanks for having me on the show.
And Jeff, welcome to the show. This is your first episode as well, even though we've had a few Couchbase guests in the past couple of weeks. But what I want to talk to you guys about today is about digital identity and extreme personalization and how we can protect our digital identities while still receiving extremely personalized messages. So Jeff, could you explain to me what extreme personalization is to start with?
Sure. So I think it's ultimately the application design practice of building an application across all kinds of different industries that is blending together people and the products and the services or activities that they're performing in their digital lives. So it could be we have examples of booking travel, right? And so I am a member of multiple loyalty programs. Those are actually personalization programs. I actually have, while I'm browsing for my trip, I have, time sensitivity associated with when I want to go and when I want to come back. That kind of information is also, personalization profile kinds of information. And then there's, the storing in my loyalty profile. I like the aisle seat, right? And I like to give my wife the window seat. So, matching my particular preferences of things that are collected about me, and that does happen very, very regularly, to this vast array of product, services, activity catalogs that we're all using and interacting with all the time. That's a challenge for application developers right now, and is going to be continuing to be a challenge as we only become more and more mobile. We only become more and more both sensitive to information we want to track, like congratulations on getting your vaccine. That's a great thing, and it's very likely you're going to be asked that at some point in time later, in order to get into a venue or in order to get into a congregation space. So we're seeing just that kind of information plus this the ability to know when I'm passing through or what room I'm in my house. Right? There's Amazon Sidewalk kind of application is going to end up, it is akin to these kind of hyper-personalized sets of environments. And, they create a really great user experience. No doubt. I've got countless customers who are doing this solely to deliver me the kind of experience I want. I've got cruise lines that characterize themselves as the largest experience enterprise in the world, and it's all about trying to anticipate your wants and needs before you even ask, and give you concierge level kinds of capabilities wherever you go. But this is going to trickle down not from big IT budgets, but down to knowing what my my breakfast preference is when I go to my local diner. Right. That's going to happen too. So it's kind of that range.
Jeff, my question for you then is, how long have you been the VP of Product and Solutions Marketing? We're taking a quick left turn.
A quick left turn. At Couchbase, I've done this for about a year and a half. At other employers, I've either run marketing departments or been in charge of product marketing for more than 20 years.
Okay. And so my question then is, when did you see the start of extreme personalization?
I think I was talking about it and recognizing that this is kind of a regular behavior. Dating as far back as, let's say, the 1990s. The first instance of it being my own security paranoia of getting a fast track and knowing that the fast track toll taking device, which I live in the Bay Area, I go over the Golden Gate Bridge all the time. It's automated the payment process, which that's convenient. I like that. That's personalization. But what I also didn't like was the security implications of knowing where I was going, how fast I was going, and and clocking the timing distances. So I was really reticent to be adopting the fast track thing until the convenience of not having to stop at the toll booth outweighed my paranoia of getting a speeding ticket sometime in the future, or getting my insurance rates going up sometime in the future. So I that was one of the earliest instances of when I was recognizing, all right, this is happening to me regardless of whether I opt into it or not in many cases. And ultimately for that that service, I was kind of forced to opt into it. But I like the convenience now. So but that it dates back quite some time.
Yeah, because I was thinking that with extreme personalization, it's something that dates back for sure, but has really ramped up in the digital age of data collection, would you say? Right? Because definitely more people in the 21st century and like more recently in the past few years even have moved to this expectation of having that extremely personalized relationship with brands, where they are able to build off your example, say like they know when I'm going to go on vacation, they know that I'm interested in tropical destinations, they know whatever, right? And so that experience as a brand takes you to the next level. But then we get into this, as you said, the security implications of knowing all of that information. And so that's where I want to flip over to you, Mike, on the security implications of having a digital identity and what that entails, because with this extreme rise of extreme personalization and everybody collecting my data, how can I protect my digital identity?
Yeah, that's a good question. It seems like the system is kind of, I think you have to separate security and privacy here. And because a lot of what we're talking about is really the privacy of it. Who gets to see my information, and do I get some consent in that process? And it's I think we're sort of at a time where the technology has leapt ahead of our ability to actually make rules. I always talk about tools and rules, and Jeff and I are very much on the tool side, of writing software to enable companies to implement digital identity and digital experiences. But the rule side of this is, okay, do I have a right to control the use of my personal data, or do I have a right to update that data? And do I have a right to control who to share that information with? I feel like our rules and our laws are sort of behind. So not that I'm kind of pessimistic on this area, but I think that what we see in the enterprise space is that customers really want it. Like you said, you're expecting this experience. And I do think it can be a competitive advantage to companies who can use this technology well, and who can also, if they can figure out how to make you part of the process and empower you to control your data, I do think that that's a competitive advantage to them. So,
but when we have this extreme personalization, I guess like coming into the front door, how has online authentication evolved as we are getting more into extreme personalization?
Yeah, so we see it as a big challenge for companies. So the front door is basically, you authenticate. Everybody's familiar with putting in a username and password, but we don't think about what happens after that. And this is really where we've been collaborating with Couchbase is that. So after the authentication, of course, has to happen fast. Nobody wants to wait around for that. But as you're traversing a website, or your mobile app is calling APIs and doing all this stuff for you on the back end, or you're walking around on that cruise ship and your IoT device is interacting with a lot of devices or a lot of systems, that initial identification needs to be conveyed to these different services. And so this is one of the challenges of personalization, is that because this centralized identity information is being shared with all these different services, its availability is critical, and also the performance is critical. And what we found is that, with this personalization comes more and more demand for concurrency. And then that's where we started looking to companies like Couchbase to be able to help us to scale out and utilize the cloud computing technologies more efficiently with a database. And databases weren't necessarily designed for cloud. So
right. What do you mean by availability?
So most consumer-facing applications tend to be multi-data center.
Okay.
So if one data center goes down, the service is not offline.
Okay.
Nobody wants to be their Netflix TV spinning. That's, you're going to be grumpy about that for sure.
Or run into a situation where your front door is locked. It is, if that is the initial and ongoing interface between you and your customer, right? You've got to, always have, a mechanism to allow the customer to get in. Otherwise, you're losing revenue. You're losing customer experience points with your customer.
Right.
And the cloud has been great at this, because we have never has it been so easy to do multi-data center deployments. Like when I started in the business in the 90s, it was all about quote unquote disaster recovery and building multiple data centers. And now you're just like, well, let's use, Amazon and Google and Microsoft and Red Hat and IBM. They all have networks for us, and we can just jump on them and get this type of, business continuity.
Yes. Actually, I wanted to build off of that. Mike, when did you found Gluu? Found? Is that a word?
Yes, that is a word.
Oh my gosh.
It's been 12 years now.
When did you start?
So we started in 2009, which in a lot of ways was sort of at the end of an era. It was the beginning of the cloud era. And so 12 years doesn't seem like a long time, but in terms of what's happened in the industry, it really is.
For sure.
And we started, I'd been working in the business, probably for about 15 years before I started the company. And I just felt that, wouldn't it be great if there was an open source digital identity platform? At the time, the business was dominated by Oracle and IBM and Computer Associates. And I was like, why isn't there an open source one of these? Everyone must want that. And so we started Gluu really to build an open source digital identity platform. And we've been, it was way harder than I thought to do it, and we're still at it. But that was sort of the origin of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is crazy, like the security implications, the growth in the past 12 years of digital in general. Definitely a good industry for you to get in, I feel.
Yeah, so it's caused us to pivot, because there's also been this huge migration to the cloud. And so I think all of our starting assumptions got challenged as with the emergence of cloud computing and cloud providing. So it's been a lot of pivoting, but yeah, we are really lucky in that we're in a very fast growing industry. So yeah, we couldn't ask for like a more interesting dynamic market.
Wait, as a authentication company, how did cloud computing change your direction?
So we started around the same time as Okta. So, as Gluu is, our customers have always been more on the high end, customers who have economies of scale to host their own infrastructure. They have IT departments, they have projects, and we've always catered to the really high end type of use cases. But when we started in 2009, there was no Okta, there was no Auth0, or Microsoft Azure AD. So these companies really changed the market a lot, because now it's almost become the de facto standard where you'd say, oh, why am I going to host this complicated infrastructure if Okta or Auth0 can do it for me? And that had huge impact on the market. So the software, the self-hosted software vendors in the market all of us have trended to cater towards the high end, and the whole middle market and SMB part of the market just evaporated.
Right. And so is what you do related then to like something like Azure, where they are doing like 2FA or that kind of user authentication, like
Yes.
front door experience? Okay.
Yeah, so everyone's familiar with Google, right? So you've done that. So Gluu, if you wanted to host your own Google identity system, that's what Gluu does.
Oh, okay.
We present you with one or more login pages, and then after you've authenticated, we would issue tokens to other service providers. Like, for example, have you ever gone to a website and you hit Google login and it says this app, this website wants to see your calendar or something? That's OAuth working in the background. So that's the authorization that I'm talking about, where you have to, because Google doesn't know if you want to, it should let this third party update your calendar. So the personalization, I think, extends. Here's kind of where it gets complicated. It's if you own everything, it's really straightforward. If Google doesn't have to ask me if I can share my email with Gmail, like they own that. But if it's some third party, they don't know and they have to ask you. And this is where we've seen a lot of change from, let's say, the early days of the internet, where we have this system of interconnected services that need our data. And that's created a lot more demand for this data, and it's really, and nobody, I think, 20 years ago would have imagined like the scale of these systems and how many transactions per second you need to actually process in order to meet the expectations of like consumers. So,
what is the expectation?
Well, everyone just expects everything to work. So it has to work, and it has to work fast. 1 billion authentications, just to give you an idea, 1 billion authentications per day was 60,000 transactions per second on Couchbase. So these are hard numbers to achieve. Yeah, and our disks haven't gotten a lot faster. So in order to really get this performance, we need software. The hardware that we can't get the disk spindle to go any faster. So in order to really get this scale, we need to put more disks to work. And in order to do that, we need better software. And at the same time, we also have to drive down operational complexity, because if you need to train for a year to be proficient at operating these highly complex multi-data center clusters, then it's not your total cost of ownership goes way up, and companies won't be able to do it. So this is another area where we felt Couchbase, helps our customer deliver these systems at scale.
Right. Yeah, I can't imagine 60,000 transactions per second is hard to even fathom. Or 1 billion authentications is hard to even fathom. But okay, cool. And as far as like building off of the front door experience, does the CAPTCHA kind of experience have anything to do with this too? Where you have to like select all of the traffic lights?
That's a way to tell if you're a human and not a hacker. So we have all these strategies for basically preventing fraud and mitigating risk. So biometric authentication, testing if you're a human, looking at your IP address. I heard that Google looks at like 100 different things. You only, you do a couple of things, but in the background, they're looking at your session and they're doing all this fraud and risk analysis to see, is it really you? And do they need to take extra steps to mitigate that risk? So that's part of the authentication. What we call authentication is at Gluu, we call it the authentication workflow, because that workflow is often multiple steps and then adjusts based upon the risk. So it's called adaptive authentication.
So you're telling me it doesn't actually matter whether I select that photo with the tiny little piece of traffic light in it or not?
No, that's just one piece of data that they're using to tell.
Yeah, it's not the
they're
only
probably
piece of
not going to
data
let
they're
you
using.
proceed without that.
It's not the be all end all. They're not gonna be like,
Right.
oh, she's a robot. Didn't get that one.
It helps. It helps mitigate like probably a whole set of risks. Because if we can let computers impersonate humans, then they can do it much more quickly. So I bet you it does. I mean, our customers ask for it, and we do it. And so there's a lot of theories. I always say that I wish people spend more time actually improving authentication technology and less time detecting intrusions. So, because wouldn't it be better to prevent the hacker from getting in the first place than in detecting that he's there or she's
Yep,
there?
for
Um,
sure.
but I frequently wonder why, because 80% of the breaches, the root cause is failure to properly identify the person. And so this is the vast majority as a result of bad authentication. Shouldn't we invest more there? But it seems like a disproportionate part of the investment in security is in other places. I always wonder why that is.
Mike, what do you think about the AI kind of way that trend that we're going into, where they can tell based on user behavior whether that user is the correct user or not? You know what I mean? Like keystroke monitoring and like the behavior that they do, quote unquote, regular behavior when they collect all that data. What do you think about that?
I like that kind of technology because it doesn't impact the user experience. Although some of it is really more fraud detection, not actually authentication. Authentication is when you're asserting, I am Amy, because I know
Yeah.
the password or I have presented my biometric. A lot of times what you're talking about is happening after authentication. They might be
Post
monitoring
breach.
your voice.
Yeah.
So, for example, you call your bank and you authenticate, but then you continue to interact with your bank, and then they detect through voice that your voice is not consistent with a past pattern, and that might throw off an alert.
Right.
But it's actually is it authentication or fraud detection?
Right.
But in
But
general, I like that kind of thing because it doesn't necessarily impact the user experience.
right. But like let's say that there was a stolen endpoint and they had like a sticky note with the password on there, right? Theoretically, they could go get past the authentication, and then at that point this new kind of software would let you know that that user is not the user. That's how it goes in my mind anyways.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I think that that's true. And then based on whatever other perhaps behaviors or location information, where does that endpoint device go, right? Does it go somewhere brand new? Those kind of things are also inputs to the fraud detection algorithms, right? And fraud detection is another major, use case for Couchbase in that, gathering that data and then making sure, doing the pattern recognition on whether or not, the device itself that you're watching is now in a brand new location that you've never ever seen before, and it doesn't fit any other type of pattern that the user has established in the past. That kind of information is what feeds the fraud detectors. And then if you start using the transaction payment mechanism on it, that's where the good user experience comes in that, oh, that transaction doesn't look right. We're going to freeze it, right? Which is what your banks are likely to do. But it's all, in many cases, it's the same fraud detector that's out there, keeping watch over all of this.
Yep. And Jeff, I would like to chat about, I guess, the future of authentication and the front door experience overall. What are your thoughts as the solutions marketing person at Couchbase for trends in this area, or where do you see this kind of technology going?
Well, so what was interesting is last year triggered a lot of brand new behaviors in all of us.
Yes.
Right? So when the way we sort of saw everything was, for an IT organization, one of two things happened to them, and so in many cases both. One was when your users disappeared from where they used to be and congregate, they all went online. And then they created that concurrency problem that Mike was talking about. They're hitting your system, whether it's your first authentication or the activities that they're doing afterwards. They're hitting that so frequently that they run into experience problems. Your system's too slow. It's not able to serve me what I want right now. And there's a likelihood that because the user is not accustomed to doing that all the time, that their frustration level is going to go through the roof really quickly. Mm-hmm. So you get a dissatisfied user just because they tried your online experience. So that's one driver of, man, we got to change this, right? Yeah. The other driver is kind of the opposite. It's the reaction to, where'd everybody go, right? And you have to change or add functionality or do something different to actually pivot so that you can indeed chase down your customers, your users to all of these new locations that they happen to be. And there's perhaps a likelihood there that your legacy system that you've been depending on for 5 or 10 years doesn't have that flexibility built into it. So your ability to move the iceberg is really, really difficult when you want to be as nimble as possible right now, because back in August or a year ago from now, or a year ago past, right, there was this like reaction of really either where did everybody go or, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed like it's Black Friday, right? You had either of those situations happening. So those are kind of now the new rules of the game. Mm-hmm. You need to have flexibility. You need to have availability, as Mike was talking about a minute ago. Yeah. But then project where these things are going to happen and how we've been talking about them.
Yeah.
They've created these, the need for these new smart kind of environments. And what's, the other thing going on right now is the deployment of 5G networks everywhere, which by design, they're supposed to give you this incredibly fast network in small locations, in specific, like mesh environments. So when the cruise ship is a great one because I've got a customer that does that, but there's, also your hotel and also, your grocery store or the big box store or the restaurant you're in, right? Pretty much wherever any, sets of people congregate, or are going to recongregate as the world opens up again, on an airplane, in a transit center, on a bus, right? All of these things are going to turn into these smart environments because, the user expectation of like, okay, now I know I'm online and I can do all these things. That's very, very high. But then the ability to create a better experience because of that. They know where you are. They know you're on your commute. They know, that you're probably listening to an audiobook, right? But you can come up with ways in which to, deliver that, again, that experience really, really effectively and seamlessly, as long as they know who you are and can back match it to past patterns of behavior or, information they've collected in the past, and do so in a trustworthy way. But it's these smart environments, they're going to be everywhere, right? And this is what, even the second generation evolution of your smart home, right? That they're warning us about right now all over the web of, Amazon Sidewalk is a new mesh networking mechanism that's going to integrate, take advantage of the fact that the Nest or the Echo that I have in my house probably can still talk to my neighbor's Nest ecosystem in their house, and the little key fob tracker on the dog, on the neighborhood dog, as it goes by my house, it can tell it just went by here, and then as it goes by my neighbor's house, it went by over there, and the owner of the dog can look up and go, "Where's my dog?" Right? That's a better user experience, but that's also part of this, evolution of these kind of smart environments that's going to keep happening.
Mm-hmm. And where do you see this going with the notion that I'd be terrified if a technology could track where my dog was? You know what I mean? Like the age of decentralization and caring about your digital persona and your privacy. How can we combat that with the rise, or how can they both rise at the same time, extreme personalization and the privacy issues?
Well, there's, and I think Mike can kind of play off this too, there ultimately will be always the case where we can point back to, you opted into this in some form. Yeah. And therefore you can opt out of it in some form. So, the opting out, Google tracks my location information on my phone for only 3 months. right? That's actually the degree to which they allow you to say, stop tracking me, right? And don't keep that history that far back. But I expect that's going to be the case with this data. Amazon Sidewalk thing. They're telling you, turn off these features on your Echo if you want to opt out of it, right? You don't want your network bandwidth to be consumed, but with their their devices and the convenience they're offering to somebody that's not you. So there's going to be an increased balance in that opt-in, opt-out thing, and that's going to take place not only at the micro level, right, of like me inside of my house, but also at the macro level of me living in California or me living in Germany, where data residency requirement laws have also popped up, so that the resident server of my profile is going to live closer to me than Reston, Virginia, right? I'm in California, so it's going to be it'll start to be things like that where the degree of control that I'm ultimately allotted is going to need to go up, right? So you can ultimately determine how much opt-in stuff you do and you don't do.
Yeah, Mike, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the rise of the need for security, privacy security, and the direction that authentication is going to go in to address it.
Yeah, so I think it's, like I said before, I'm on the tool side.
Yeah.
And the Gluu server, and this is more like, I think you have to separate the personal and the business here. On the personal side, I'm not paranoid about my data. I have a lot of apps running on my phone, but I try to minimize them. So I think there's sort of a range of how people feel about how much they want to share. And I'm more like, I won't have an Amazon Echo in my house, for example. But I'm not I won't not use social networks either. I'm on Instagram too. So I'm sort of somewhere in the middle. At a business level, it's interesting because the Gluu server can be used to help companies implement systems that give people control of their privacy by enabling them to consent into services. And so Gluu is very supportive of this type of use case. But we also have the opposite use case at Gluu, where we want to achieve maximum accountability. So for example, in a Department of Defense application, we want to know, did this person log in at this time and do this thing? So we have an audit trail. So you can say that type of application of the Gluu server is privacy degrading, because we don't want privacy there. We want the opposite of privacy. We want complete accountability. So on the technology side, I would say we've designed the Gluu server to let you choose, what degree of privacy you want to offer, and to implement features that enable companies to give users more control. But there's also sort of a philosophical or ethical question, let's say, that I don't think I'm qualified to answer, about the direction our society is going with regard to how we protect that privacy, and how companies have exploited it. There's a very good documentary called The Social Dilemma, which I recommend. And I think that does a pretty good job in a good 2 hours of exploring some of the edges of that conversation, and which is definitely, I think, as a society, I think it's going to take us a long time. The rules follow the tools there's a considerable delay. And so I'm kind of I'm not sure that this will be solved in my career trajectory. I'm 51, so maybe I have another 15 years or so. So I think that these things might take longer to sort out than people think, and that in the meantime, we might find ourselves in a situation where companies are exploiting this sort of opportunity where we're in the Wild West of data aggregation. So I don't know, but
I think I'm in a similar boat to you in terms of caring about my data privacy. I don't have an Echo, but I I use social media. I mean, actually, I might take it even one step further than you, because I let Google see all of my location data. I let them track it. But that is because I listened to this podcast, which I highly recommend. It's called To Live and Die in LA. And it is like a murder mystery podcast where the woman who died was found because she had her Google location data turned on. So I was like, okay, solve my murder. That's fine. Track my data, send it to third-party companies, whatever. Cool.
But that's exactly the opt-in kind of case is, that value far outweighs what my ongoing thought of my value of knowing where I am right now or where I was last week. Very, very true. And in some cases there are very valid situations, like that one.
I'm more afraid of my body never being found than Google having my data. So.
Yes.
I have a friend who says if they take our Google away, there'll be a revolution. Like if they try and, once you have these platforms and this level of convenience, and then you contemplate, life without, Google Maps or something, or Waze, that actually, if you took them away, people they might actually revolt.
Oh no, I would not survive without Google Maps. I'm speechless. I can't even.
I think we all agree on that, right? But what we're finding right now as everything evolves is that it's that not only how am I going to get from here to 20 miles away, but the granularity of your location information is going to keep getting more and more valuable, right? Like, so my phone knowing that I'm in my office rather than my living room, right, could be the difference between what shows up on my television here, what shows up on my television upstairs, that kind of thing, or recognizing that it's my kids upstairs and not not an adult kind of thing. So it might scope down what's available upstairs versus what's not. So that location, the value of location data is very, very high, and and the return on that value of location data is also very high. So that's the thing we end up, I think, giving up on. The value of my health data, right, is also super, super high, and not something that I really want. Every application on my phone knowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think that Google location data and GPS technology might have to get a little better to tell if you're in your living room versus your office. I think Google location technology is accurate down within a city block, so it's still a little bit sometimes not as accurate.
Come on, it's better than that.
If they don't have your GPS,
your Uber picks you up at the address and it maps you at the exact address. It's within a couple of feet.
If you're outside, I think if they have the GPS, it's a couple of feet. If you're in a big interior, then they're using the Wi-Fi triangulation. It's not as accurate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that they've figured out that they need to do both is pretty impressive.